we hear the sad news of the passing of legends. Today, the world says goodbye to remarkable souls who left their mark on history, hearts, and homes. In this video, we take a moment to remember them, to honor their legacy, their laughter, their love, and their light. Join us as we pay tribute to those we lost and celebrate the unforgettable lives they lived.
In an age of noise, he brought clarity. In the corridors of power, he brought reason. And when the world needed calm in the storm, David Gergen showed up quiet, brilliant, and steadfast. On July 10, 2025, the world lost one of its most trusted political minds. David Gergen, respected presidential advisor, author, and longtime CNN political commentator, passed away at the age of 83. A man of balance, intellect, and uncommon civility, Gergen's influence spanned both parties, multiple generations, and some of the most defining moments in modern American history. Born on May 9, 1942, in Durham, North Carolina, Gergen graduated from Yale University and earned a law degree from Harvard Law School. His academic pedigree opened doors, but it was his deep moral compass, intellectual agility, and refusal to bend to ideological extremes that made him indispensable in Washington, D.C. Gergen served as a White House advisor to 4 U.S. presidents, Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton, a rare feat that highlighted both his bipartisan appeal and his loyalty to public service over party lines. For Republicans, he brought strategic communications and an analytical mind. For Democrats, he brought seasoned perspective and an understanding of conservative concerns. For America, he brought a model of reasoned, respectful leadership. His roles varied: speechwriter, director of communications, counselor, but his influence remained constant. When the nation was in flux, Gergen was often behind the scenes, helping craft some of the most important messages to reach the American public. But it wasn't just his proximity to power that defined him, it was his voice. As a longtime CNN senior political analyst, Gergen became a trusted figure on television screens across the country. With his measured tone, sharp analysis, and refusal to give in to hysteria, he earned the respect of viewers across the political spectrum. Whether explaining a crisis, dissecting an election, or simply reminding America of its better angels, Gergen was calm in chaos, truthful in turmoil, and empathetic in argument. Beyond media, Gergen shaped generations of future leaders as a professor at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, where he led the Center for Public Leadership. Students, scholars, and policymakers alike regarded him as a mentor and a moral compass. His best-selling book, Eyewitness to Power, gave readers a behind-the-scenes look at leadership in the Oval Office and, more importantly, at what good leadership should look like everywhere. After news of his passing, tributes poured in from across the political aisle. President Clinton once said of Gergen, "He didn't care about credit, he cared about the country." Anderson Cooper, his CNN colleague, remarked, "David was the rare voice who could bring light, not heat. He made us smarter, calmer, and better." Though Gergen never sought the spotlight, his absence is deeply felt. In a time when trust in public discourse often feels fragile, his example reminds us what it means to serve with dignity, speak with truth, and lead with purpose. Rest in peace, David Gergen. You served not just presidents but the American people with grace, wisdom, and unwavering honor. Golf is a game of patience, persistence, and quiet power. And no one lived that truth quite like Ed Fiori, a man who never chased fame, but earned respect every time he stepped onto the green. On July 6, 2025, the golf world said goodbye to one of its most beloved fighters. Ed Fiori, a 4-time PGA Tour winner, passed away at the age of 72 after a courageous battle with cancer. He may never have been the flashiest name in the sport, but his story, his strength, and his spirit made him unforgettable. Born on April 21, 1953, in Linwood, California, Ed grew up in Southern California with dreams that didn't involve trophies, just grass under his feet and a club in his hand. He wasn't a child prodigy. He didn't come from country club privilege, but he had something else: grit. Fiori turned professional in 1977, quietly grinding his way onto the PGA Tour, known affectionately as the Grizzly, due to his stocky build and beard. He didn't look like the typical tour player, but when Ed lined up a shot, you knew you were watching a man who had put in the hours. Every single one. His first PGA Tour win came in 1979 at the Southern Open. He would go on to capture 3 more titles during his career. But his most famous victory came in 1996, and not just because of the trophy. That year, at the Quad City Classic, Ed Fiori did something no one expected. He stopped Tiger Woods. Tiger, then just 20 years old, was the rising storm of professional golf. The world waited for his first pro win, but Ed Fiori, in what would be his final PGA Tour victory, outlasted the young phenom and delayed Tiger's first triumph by 1 tournament. It was a moment that etched Ed forever into golf history, a symbol that the old guard still had fight. that win wasn't just about the scoreboard, it was about legacy. It was about showing that heart matters more than hype, and that anyone, at any age, can rise on the right day. Beyond the fairways, Ed battled injuries, back problems, and later, a serious spinal surgery. But through it all, he never lost his humility or love for the game. He wasn't interested in endorsements or limelight. He was interested in playing good golf and helping others play better. After retiring, he continued to mentor young golfers, teach at local clubs, and share stories. From his decades on tour, his warmth, authenticity, and old-school charm made him a favorite among fans and fellow players alike. When news of his passing broke, PGA Tour legends and newcomers alike paid tribute. David Duval wrote, "Ed Fiori reminded us that golf is about moments, quiet, powerful, personal. He had one of the most important moments of the 90s, and he earned every inch of it. His story is not one of dominance, but of defiance, of proving you belong, even when the world expects someone else to shine. He walked softly, swung confidently, and smiled through it all." That's Ed Fiori's legacy. Rest in peace, Ed Fiori. You may have played in the shadows of giants, but you were a giant in your own right, and you'll forever stand tall in the heart of the game. Basketball has had many architects, but only a few made the game feel like family. Frank Layden didn't just build teams, he built belief, laughter, and loyalty. And he did it all with a twinkle in his eye. On July 9, 2025, the basketball world said goodbye to one of its great personalities. Frank Layden, former head coach and president of the Utah Jazz, passed away at the age of 93. Known as much for his booming laugh and comedic press conferences as for his sharp basketball mind, Layden was a one-of-a-kind figure whose legacy echoes from the court to the front office. Born January 5, 1932, in Brooklyn, New York, Frank Layden grew up in the hardscrabble heart of the city where basketball wasn't just a sport, it was a street corner symphony. After serving in the U.S. Army and playing collegiate ball at Niagara University, he began his coaching journey with passion and an eye for talent. He coached at Niagara from 1968 to 1976, then made the leap to the NBA as an assistant with the Atlanta Hawks, before joining the then-struggling New Orleans Jazz in the mid-1970s. When the franchise moved to Utah in 1979, Layden's real legacy began. By the early 1980s, he had taken over as head coach and eventually team president, helping to transform the Utah Jazz from league afterthought into a model of consistency and class. Layden's crowning achievement came in his keen eye for character and chemistry. It was Frank who drafted John Stockton in 1984, despite boos from fans who didn't recognize the quiet point guard's brilliance. It was Frank who selected Karl Malone the following year, launching one of the most iconic duos in NBA history, and it was Frank who nurtured the foundation that would carry the Jazz through 2 decades of playoff success. In 1984, Layden was named NBA Coach of the Year, NBA Executive of the Year, and J. Walter Kennedy's Citizenship Award winner, rare trifecta that speaks not just to his skill, but to his heart. On the court, he was a passionate strategist. Off the court, he was a showman, quipping with reporters, making self-deprecating jokes, and never missing a chance to lighten the mood. He once famously said, "I left coaching because I got tired of getting a hernia. Every time I tried to yell at Karl Malone." His humor made him beloved by fans, media, and players alike. But beneath the laughter was a brilliant basketball mind and a deeply compassionate mentor. In 1988, Layden stepped down as head coach to make way for his longtime assistant and dear friend, Jerry Sloan, solidifying a smooth transition that kept the Jazz competitive for years to come. Frank remained a fixture in the Jazz community long after retirement, attending games, offering advice, and mentoring young front office staff. He became a symbol of Utah basketball, one part New York toughness, one part small market devotion. Following his passing, the Utah Jazz released a statement calling Layden the heartbeat of our franchise, a man of laughter, love, and legacy. Former players, coaches, and media figures paid tribute across social media, sharing stories of Frank's warmth, generosity, and endless humor. In a sport often defined by ego and intensity, Frank Layden brought something rarer: joy, humility, and loyalty. He taught us that winning matters, but how you lead matters more. Rest in peace, Frank Layden. You didn't just coach the game, you made it smile. You may not have known his face, but you knew his voice. It made you laugh, made you cheer, and stayed with you long after the screen went dark. James Carter Cathcart wasn't just a voice actor, he was the voice of a generation. On a quiet day in 2025, the world of animation and anime lost one of its greatest talents. James Carter Cathcart, beloved voice actor known for his work on Pac-Man, UGF, and Sonic X, passed away at the age of 71, following a battle with cancer that he faced with courage and grace. Born on March 8, 1954. In New Jersey, Cathcart began his career as a musician, playing keyboards and singing in bands throughout the 1970s and 80s, but it was behind the microphone of camera, but never off impact where he found his true home. To fans. He was best known as the unforgettable voice of James and Meowth from Team Rocket in the English dub of Pac-Man, a role he performed from the show's debut in 1998 all the way through 2023, with a perfect blend of comedic timing and heartfelt delivery. Cathcart turned what could have been simple villains into beloved icons. Prepare for trouble and make it double. The world recited those lines because James Carter Cathcart made them magic. He voiced over a dozen characters in Pac-Man, including Professor Oak, Gary Oak, and many side characters. His range so seamless, many fans never knew the same man was behind them all. But Cathcart's work extended far beyond Pac-Man and Yu-Gi-Oh! He portrayed characters like Weevil Underwood and Vector, lending his unmistakable voice to the world of shadow duels and ancient magic. In Sonic X, he voiced Vector, the crocodile, adding humor and heart to the high-speed adventures. What made Cathcart truly special was not just his talent, but his dedication. Even after being diagnosed with tongue and throat cancer in 2023, he continued to record for Pac-Man until he physically could no longer do so. His passion for the craft and for the fans never wavered. Behind the scenes, he was kind, humble, and deeply respected by colleagues across the dubbing and anime world. Fellow voice actors described him as the soul of Pac-Man, a vocal chameleon, and a true mentor to younger talent. When news of his passing broke, tributes flooded in from around the world. Fans on every continent posted videos, voice impressions, and memories from childhood. Proof that his work had left a global emotional footprint. The official Pac-Man company released a simple but powerful statement. James Carter Cathcart helped bring our stories to life. His legacy lives on in every child who ever dreamed of being a Pac-Man trainer. In a world where animated voices often go unrecognized, James Carter Cathcart was a Gianta craftsman of character, a comedian of the microphone, and a gentle soul whose voice carried joy across generations. Though the battles are over and the credits have rolled, your voice still echoes in every pokeball throw, every villainous plan, and every laugh from childhood. Rest in peace, James Carter Cathcart. You didn't just speak, you inspired, and that will never fade. Some actors perform, others burn. Michael Madsen didn't just say lines, he carved them into celluloid with gravel in his voice and fire in his stare. He was Hollywood's outlaw poet, the man you couldn't ignore, even in silence. On July 3, 2025, the film world lost a cinematic force of nature. Michael Madsen, the iconic actor known for his unforgettable roles in Reservoir Dogs, Kill Bill, and The Hateful Eight, died at the age of 67 in Malibu, California, after suffering a cardiac arrest. Underlying factors included chronic heart disease and complications linked to alcoholism, a battle he faced for decades behind the camera's glare. Born on September 25, 1957, in Chicago, Illinois, Michael Soren Madsen grew up in a working-class family steeped in storytelling. His mother was a filmmaker and poet. His sister, Virginia Madsen, would also go on to become an acclaimed actress. Michael began his artistic journey not in front of the camera, but behind the scenes, working in a Chicago theater under the legendary John Malkovich. But it wasn't long before Madsen's presence's imposing frame, slow-burning intensity, and unmistakable voice caught the eye of Hollywood. His breakout came in the early 1990s with Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, where his portrayal of Mr. Blondecool, sadistic and strangely charismatic, etched itself into movie history. That scene, stuck in the middle with you blaring on a radio, a cop, a razor, a dance. It wasn't just disturbing, it was iconic. And it was pure Madsen. Over the next 3 decades, he became the go-to actor for dangerous men with complicated hearts. In Kill Bill, he was Bud the Weary, whiskey-soaked brother with buried loyalty. In Donnie Brasco, Sin City, and The Hateful Eight, he brought nuance to roles that could have been one note in lesser hands. Michael starred in over 200 films, but never became a Hollywood cliché. He resisted the polish, the pretension, the PR-mold. He was gritty, vulnerable, and unapologetically real both on-screen and off. Away from the camera, Madsen was a poet publishing several volumes of verse that gave raw insight into his battles with fame, addiction, and heartbreak. His writing, like his acting, was honest to the bone. He also struggled publicly with alcoholism, legal issues, and personal loss, including the tragic death of his son Hudson in 2022. Through it all, Michael remained a fighter, often returning to work, seeking redemption through art. Following his passing, Quentin Tarantino released a simple but heartfelt message. Michael brought my characters to life in ways I never imagined. He was loyal, brilliant, and had soul. I loved him like a brother. Tributes also came from co-stars, fans, and filmmakers who knew that while Madsen may not have headlined blockbusters, he defined a generation of cinematic cool that dangerous edge that gave 90s cinema its bite. Some actors are remembered for awards. Michael Madsen is remembered for impact. He wasn't the polished hero. He was the man in the shadows, flicking a match, telling hard truths, bleeding authenticity into every role. Rest in power. Michael Madsen, you weren't just in movies, you made them matter. Before radar guns tracked every pitch, before the game was digitized and dissected, there was Joe Coleman standing tall on the mound, glove tucked tight, ready to challenge any hitter with courage and heat. He wasn't just a pitcher, he was a chapter in baseball's living story. On July 9, 2025, the baseball world lost a bridge to its golden past. Joe Coleman, a former Major League Baseball pitcher, passed away peacefully at the age of 78. Across 15 seasons and more than 1,700 strikeouts, Coleman carved out a name as a reliable arm, a quiet competitor, and part of one of baseball's most storied families. Born on February 3, 1947, in Boston, Massachusetts, Joe was practically born with a baseball in his hand. His father, Joe Coleman Sr., pitched in the majors during the 1940s and 50s, and would eventually pass the torch to his son, not just in name, but in poise, control, and love for the game. Drafted third overall in the 1965 MLB draft, Joe debuted as a 19-year-old with the Washington Senators. He soon blossomed into one of the American League's steadiest starters. But it was with the Detroit Tigers, following a trade in 1971, that he found his prime. From 1971 to 1973, he posted 3 consecutive 20-win seasons, racking up innings, strikeouts, and postseason starts with quiet dominance. In 1972, Coleman was named an American League All-Star, finishing the year with 19 complete games, a 2.80 ERA, and 222 strikeouts, earning his place among the league's elite. He helped guide the Tigers to the ALCS, pitching with fire and finesse against the game's best. His arsenal wasn't flashy, but it was fierce, a high-velocity fastball, a biting curve, and an unrelenting will to win. Over a 15-year career, he would pitch for the Senators, Tigers, Cubs, Athletics, Giants, and Pirates, ending with 142 career wins, 1,728 strikeouts, and a reputation as a true professional. Teammates remember him as intensely focused, modest, and dependable to the last out, but Joe Coleman's influence went beyond stats. After retiring in 1979, he became a pitching coach and mentor across several organizations. His deep understanding of mechanics, tempo, and mental toughness made him a trusted voice in clubhouses. Long after his playing days were done, and baseball was truly in his bloodline, his son, Casey Coleman, would go on to pitch in the majors as well, making the Colemans one of baseball's rare 3-generation families to play in the big leagues, joining a revered circle of legacy names like the Boones and Bells. Across generations, Joe remained humble, generous with advice, and endlessly dedicated to the game. After news of his passing, the Detroit Tigers released a heartfelt tribute. Joe Coleman was a rock in our rotation, a leader in our clubhouse, and a gentleman of the game. His presence shaped an era of Tigers baseball that fans will never forget. Baseball may evolve, but the principles Joe Coleman stood for never change: discipline, respect, and quiet excellence. He never needed the spotlight to shine. His pitching did the talking. And now, his legacy will speak for him. Forever, rest in peace, Joe Coleman. You pitched with purpose, and your memory will forever live on in the soul of the game. **. He wasn't just a coach. He was a storm, a spark, a truth-teller in a world of canned answers. Lee Elia lived and breathed baseball not for the headlines, but for the heartbeat of the game. On July 9, 2025, the baseball world bid farewell to one of its most passionate and unapologetic figures. Lee Elia, former Major League Baseball player, manager, and longtime coach, passed away at the age of 87 from natural causes. Though he may be best remembered for a fiery rant, Elia's true legacy runs far deeper, etched into decades of dugouts, friendships, and fierce loyalty. Born on July 16, 1937, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Lee Elia was a product of blue-collar grit and East Coast tenacity. He played shortstop at the University of Delaware and was signed by the Cincinnati Reds, eventually making his MLB debut with the Chicago White Sox in 1966. Though his big league playing career was brief, Elia was never far from the game. He transitioned to coaching in the 1970s, climbing the ranks in the Phillies organization and becoming known for his no-nonsense attitude and commitment to his players. His deep understanding of the game, mixed with a fiery temperament, made him both feared and respected. Elia earned his place in the spotlight as manager of the Chicago Cubs from 1982 to 1983. His most famous and infamous moment came during an explosive postgame tirade on April 29, 1983, where he unleashed a profanity-laced defense of his team in frustration with heckling fans. While the rant became legendary, Even comedic in hindsight, it revealed the depth of his devotion to his players. Ilya wasn't raging for attention, he was standing up for men he believed in. After the Cubs, Ilya managed the Philadelphia Phillies from 1987 to 1988, and later served as a coach for several clubs, including the Yankees, Mariners, Blue Jays, Rays, and Orioles. He worked under greats like Lou Piniella and Joe Torre, bringing decades of wisdom, discipline, and old-school fire to every role. For those inside the clubhouse, Ilya was more than a coach. He was a mentor, a motivator, and a truth-teller. He never sugar-coated performance, but he always had your back. Players described him as the kind of guy who'd challenge you hard, but never walk away when you needed support. Beyond the dugout, Ilya was deeply connected to Philadelphia's youth baseball programs, giving back to his roots and helping mentor aspiring coaches. Despite the rough edges, he was known for his kindness off the field, his fierce loyalty, and a surprising sense of humor. After his passing, the Cubs and Phillies organizations released heartfelt tributes. One read, "Lee Ilya gave everything. He had to the game of baseball his heart, his voice, his fight. He will always be a part of our story." Sports writers, former players, and managers chimed in across social media, honoring a man who never played politics, never chased glory, but always fought for the team. In an era of polished soundbites and corporate coaching, Lee Ilya reminded us what raw passion looks like, what defending your players sounds like, and what living for the game truly means. Rest easy, Lee Ilya. You may have stormed through the game, but your love for it ran deep and true, and that's what we'll remember most. Not every hero in basketball wears a superstar label. Some make their mark in sweat, hustle, and loyalty. Ryan Reed was one of those men, a quiet warrior whose journey spoke louder than any highlight reel. On July 9, 2025, former professional basketball player Ryan Reed passed away at the age of 38, leaving behind a legacy built not on fame, but on heart, perseverance, and grit. Though details surrounding his death remain private, the basketball world came together in mourning, testament to the respect he earned across teams and borders. Born on October 30, 1986, in Lauderhill, Florida, Ryan was raised by a Jamaican-American family that instilled in him the values of discipline, humility, and persistence. From an early age, basketball was more than a game, it was a calling. He played college ball at Florida State University under coach Leonard Hamilton, where he developed a reputation as a tough defender, physical forward, and unselfish teammate. He wasn't a flashy scorer, but he was the kind of player every coach trusted, every star wanted beside them. In 2010, Reed was selected 57th overall in the NBA draft by the Indiana Pacers, but his rights were quickly traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Though he appeared in just a few NBA games during the 2011 to 2012 season, his impact behind the scenes was unmistakable. He was a constant presence with the Thunder's G-League affiliate, the Tulsa Sixers, serving as a mentor to younger players and a glue guy in every locker room he entered. But Ryan Reed's basketball story didn't end there. He went on to have a successful international career, playing in leagues across France, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and beyond. Whether he was in front of thousands or just a few hundred, he brought the same intensity to every game, diving for loose balls, boxing out giants, and doing the dirty work that made stars shine. In 2013, he became a naturalized Jamaican citizen and proudly represented Team Jamaica in international competition, helping elevate the nation's basketball profile on the global stage. Coaches and teammates speak of Reed as one of the good ones, a man who never complained, always showed up, and gave every ounce of effort without asking for glory. Former Thunder teammate Nick Collison said, "Ryan Reed was a true pro. You won't find his name in headlines, but if you played with him, you knew he made teams better every single day." After retiring from professional play, Reed returned to Florida, where he mentored young players, helped coach at local camps, and remained deeply connected to the basketball community. He lived his life the same way he played, quiet, focused, grounded in purpose. Ryan Reed's story isn't one of it's one of endurance, of a young man who pushed through roster cuts, language barriers, homesickness, and injuries just to keep playing the game he loved. In a world obsessed with stardom, Ryan Reed represented something rarer: reliability, humility, and heart. Rest in peace, Ryan. You may not have worn a crown, but you were royalty to those who knew the game. And somewhere, a gym is quiet tonight, but your example still echoes in every young player who chooses the hard work over the highlight. In the shadows of legends, some men carve legacies of their own, not by chasing the spotlight, but by telling raw truth, standing firm, and never turning their back on loyalty. Young Noble was one of those men. On July 4, 2025, the hip-hop community was stunned by the sudden and tragic passing of young Noble. Born Rufus Cooper, 3, at the age of 47, the cause, suicide by gunshot. A deeply personal and painful end to the life of an artist who once helped shape the voice of a generation lost too soon. Born on March 21, 1978, in Rancho Cucamonga, California, Noble was raised between the coasts. Steeped in the complexities of Black American life, struggle, strength, survival. In the mid-1990s, fate and art would collide when he was invited to join one of the most legendary collectives in hip-hop history, the Outlawz. Founded by Tupac Shakur, young Noble was just 18 when he joined the group, the youngest member of Pac's circle. Given the name Young Noble by Tupac himself, he embodied the values it implied: integrity, courage, and purpose. He made his first appearance on Tupac's The Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, featured on tracks like Hail, Mary, Me, and My Girlfriend, and Life of an Outlaw. Even in the presence of giants, Noble's voice held weight, deep, unpolished, and packed with meaning. When Tupac was killed in 1996, the Outlawz became the keepers of his message. Noble was front and center, continuing to record, tours, and speak Pac's truth while evolving his own. With albums like Outlaw for Life and Son of God, Noble offered his own reflections on fame, faith, trauma, and justice. Unlike many in the industry, young Noble never chased chart positions or headlines. He remained rooted in the streets, in his beliefs, and in the idea that music could still be sacred, a tool for storytelling, resistance, and healing. But behind the music was a man battling demons. Over the years, he was open about the toll of losing friends, enduring industry betrayal, and carrying the weight of surviving when others didn't. His suicide, while devastating, opened up a flood of conversation across the hip-hop world about mental health, Black masculinity, and the pressures of loyalty in an often unforgiving world. Tributes poured in from artists like Snoop Dogg, E40, and J. Cole, all honoring the quiet strength young Noble carried through the decades. He was a soldier in life and in spirit, said fellow Outlawz member Idi Amin. He stayed true when so many lost their way. To fans, Noble was more than just Pac's protege. He was a poet for the real ones, a reminder that hip-hop wasn't just beats and hooks, but blood, scars, and soul. He leaves behind a catalog that speaks not to luxury, but to loss and resilience. Albums that speak not from a throne, but from a brother's heart. Sometimes the strongest warriors never cry out. One fan posted, "Young Noble carried the pain of 1,000 voices, and still gave us his truth." Rest in power, young Noble. The mission you started lives on in every verse about justice, every beat that heals, and every artist brave enough to speak their truth, even when it hurts. You were more than an outlaw. You were a prophet. And now, your voice rides with the ancestors,